Welcome to another episode of the Empowered Fertility Podcast, the place where we dive deep into all things fertility. I'm Dr. Brenna Squires, a clinical psychologist and fertility support coach, here to bring you the knowledge, resources, and expert insights you need to feel confident along your journey to parenthood. So let's get started. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Empowered Fertility Podcast. Today we are going deep. We're going so deep, we're going down to the cellular level. We're going to be discussing everything about environmental toxins and how that impacts our fertility. We're also going to be talking about oxidative stress and how this can deplete our energy. And lastly, we're going to go over the amazing benefits of antioxidants and IV nutrient therapy and how that can help us in our overall health and fertility journey. And if you haven't already done so, I want to encourage you to subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode. On this channel, we go over all things fertility, everything from barriers to different testing, to different doctors that you can go to different type of treatments that you may not have heard about. So go ahead and do that right now. And if you know anybody who is experiencing infertility or who is on this journey of trying to conceive, go ahead and share this channel with them. And today I am going to be speaking with a specialist in this topic. I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Will Haas. He is a board certified integrative and family medicine doctor. Dr. Haas creates customized protocols to help patients think, feel, and perform better than they did in their 20s by optimizing their cellular health. And I am so excited he's going to share some of his knowledge with us today. So welcome, Dr. Haas.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, I'm really excited about all of the different things that we're going to be going over today. And before we jump into that, can you share a little bit more about what you do and why you got started in that?
Yeah, so my training technically is board certified integrative medicine, and I've always really been fascinated about the ability for the body's innate healing potential if provided the right healthy environment. And so that has just always been one of my passions. Along that way, kind of stumbled upon the in my early readings of integrative medicine, like what better way to improve health over like the next generation is during the time of conception and when women are trying to conceive and then bringing life into this world, you can just kind of have a big impact on epigenetics and future generations. And so that really kind of then kindled my interest in the space of kind of integrative fertility, if you will, which led to the creation of a digital education company, VYVE MD, which then spilled over into a practice of mine by wellness that where I'm actually able to work with women firsthand who are looking to optimize their fertility.
Wow. So it sounds like one thing after another. One thing just you had an interest and then it just kind of led you to where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot more to unpack there along the way, but I think the one of those big transitions was kind of going beyond the ability to reach people through blogs and through courses. But then, how can I translate that? Because I had a lot of women come to me wanting to do more, right? They, and I kind of have this ability to prescribe, if you will, things like IV therapies and kind of develop deeper relationships with the patients, doing lab tests and kind of needing and leveraging the actual medical degree to create and formulate more complex treatment plans than, hey, change your diet here, take a few supplements. Those are fantastic tools that we're going to get into and they can have a huge impact. But there was kind of a desire need to go further than that, which kind of then led to the evolution and transition into kind of building more of a brick and mortar practice where I can help women trying to conceive among other individuals.
Yes, and let's go a little bit into that because we are learning more and more how important it is to go deeper because there's too many things out there that impact us at a deep level. And one thing that is kind of trending right now is endocrine disruptors and just general toxins. Can you share a little bit more about what everyday toxins are?
Yeah. So, I think we're going to also go from toxins to talking about cellular health, and they go hand in hand. And I believe fertility is kind of a reflection of the whole body health. And when you're supporting the body at a cellular level, fertility often improves naturally as a side effect. Um, and one of those areas where we can commonly get tripped up with cellular health is just that environmental toxins. All right. And when we're talking about everyday toxins, we're really referring to a group or a category of toxins that we kind of encounter through everyday modern life that are kind of referred to as endocrine disrupting chemicals. Right. These things include BPA and BPS, things that are found in plastics, and then things like phthalates found in personal care products, parabens found in cosmetics, even pesticides on our food. Right. So they're kind of found everywhere, and they have the ability to interfere with the normal function of our hormones.
And with that, I mean, we hear these things that they're in our everyday products, like our hair care, our cleaning products, our food, and some people are really invested in trying to figure out how it impacts us, while other people kind of dismiss it as it's not a big deal. So, how big of a deal is it? How much does it actually impact our hormones, our ability to ovulate, sperm quality, things like that?
Yeah, so I mean, let's take a step back. How big of a deal? Like, we're exposed to over 700 synthetic chemicals every day, right?
Goodness.
Most of which are linked directly to disrupting hormones and have a link to infertility, right?
Wow.
So we're exposed to a lot of them. So we can't just kind of dismiss it, "Oh, like, well, it's not that big of a deal." Like, they're all around us and we get exposed to so many of them, right?
My
So,
goodness.
and that can translate, I had a patient who kind of came in and were really kind of struggling. She was doing all the right things from a nutrition standpoint, had all the perfect supplements dialed in with CoQ10 and some of the other ones that we'll explore here a little bit later. But we had to take a step back and say, hey, what's sitting at your cabinet at home? Your cosmetic cabinet. And we kind of pulled that apart and we went on to a platform called Skin Deep by the Environmental Working Group. Right. And then we just kind of went through the checklist of, okay, what's in what deodorant are you using, what shampoo, what conditioners. And before we realized it, we had at least 10 different products that had known fertility disrupting properties to that. Right. And so this was an individual who's otherwise kind of like living clean and eating healthy and doing all the right things. That was just a portion that was completely overlooked.
Yeah.
And to your kind of point and question, like, how big of a deal is it beyond we're surrounded by that in the body? That means, a lot of these endocrine disrupting chemicals can interfere with things like ovulation. It can reduce progesterone levels, lower sperm count and motility for the male factor, and even impair how your thyroid functions. So they're kind of both essential for both conception and then later maintaining a healthy pregnancy. So they definitely have a pretty big impact. And they kind of, these invisible toxins just they'll hijack your hormones long before they show up on a lab test.
And when you say hijack your hormones, do you mean that they will alter the way that they are expressed, or are they depleting us from our hormones, or what kind of mechanism are they doing in our body?
Yeah, so part of it is around kind of the concept of when we call it an endocrine disrupting hormone. A lot of these chemicals will kind of sometimes act what we call as like pseudo estrogens. All right, so they're kind of they'll interact with the receptors on the cells to kind of act like our natural hormones, and so then they kind of can disrupt that. Some then will actually destroy the actual tissue. So it's like the thyroid gland, we kind of talked a little bit about that, how that can actually disrupt the thyroid and then not produce as much thyroid hormone itself. So there can be a lot of different mechanisms to that. So when I kind of say hijacking, it's mostly kind of disrupting that balance and signaling among our body's own hormones.
Yes, and you also listed where some of these things could be hiding. Do you know maybe the most common, maybe 5 or 10 that you've seen in someone's home that could be disrupting their hormones?
Yeah, it's a question. We kind of talked about there being all around us in everyday places, and we hear a lot of things like plastics, right? So food storage containers, plastic water bottles. That's where kind of like your BPA is going to hide. Just mentioned the patient who I had who didn't realize to even look at the cosmetics and the skincare, right? So they're found in the moisturizers and the makeups and the lotions. Another common place can be cookware. Right? So Teflon, even these non-stick pans can leach these PFAS when they're heated up. Drinking water is another one where you're going to kind of get the trace pesticides and pharmaceuticals and heavy metals. So those are some of the kind of top 4 or 5 that I end up seeing most frequently. And I think one of the things here to think about is you can't live in a bubble, but you can control that bubble, right?
Yeah.
So, a lot of times it's taking small, it's just developing an awareness and making small swaps, one thing at a time, until kind of drastic, like over time, reduce your overall toxic load. So, I don't want couples to get overwhelmed, and but you can control this, and you can take small steps that have a big impact over time.
Yeah, I like how you said that we don't want you to live so much in a bubble, but even then you can control it, which is true. We can control a lot of the things that are around us with the skincare that we put on our bodies, the pans that we cook in, and it's just this intentionality behind what we're doing to be able to just help us have less toxins in our environment.
Yes, intentionality and awareness are great concepts there.
Yes. And do you know of any direct links between these type of toxins and egg or egg quality or IVF outcomes, anything like that?
Yeah, so we've seen in the literature where like higher levels of BPA and phthalates correlate with lower antral follicle counts or ovarian response during IVF and lower fertilization rates. Right, so like the PFASs, they've been associated with longer time to pregnancy and reduced success rates in IVF. And a lot of these toxins can accumulate in the fatty tissues, including the ovaries. So you're definitely kind of seeing, exposures of these toxins doesn't just affect the hormones, but it can directly damage the egg itself.
When I think about that, you just said it can alter the way that it's expressing, it can disrupt them, but then it can damage them. So damage, is that damage permanent or is that something that's temporary?
Yeah. Fantastic question. That might kind of morph a little bit into this concept of oxidative stress and cellular health and healing that we can kind of unpack. But there's, this kind of concept of, I think before we go there, maybe backing up and kind of talking about like what you can do to reverse that and the concept of quote detoxing, right? We hear a lot
Do that.
about, the term detox and it gets a bad rap sometimes, right? And it's not about starving yourself or drinking celery juice for a week. um, it's actually about mostly supporting your body's daily detoxification systems, which are kind of constantly at work. And we're just trying to upregulate them and enhance them and facilitate them so some of these toxins can be cleared from the body and from the cells. Right. So we're thinking about, we talked already about reducing the burden, right?
Mhm.
Swapping out toxic products and eating organic when possible and filtering your water. So just reduce the burden. Other pillar is going to be supporting liver health. So, one of the most important organs for detoxifications. And we can do that through nutrients like glutathione, different B vitamins, and sulfur containing foods like broccoli and garlic. And then finally, we can kind of work on enhanced elimination. One topic that will probably come up is the concept of gut health as it relates to supplementation, or even the concept of like why IV nutrient therapy may have a place, right? Like you need to make sure that gut health is good and you're pooping on a daily basis. We're sweating regularly and kind of staying hydrated, so these toxins can leave the body, and they're capable of doing that. But when your detox pathways are sluggish or overwhelmed, toxins will recirculate, and that inflammation can then compromise fertility.
Yes, it's absolutely true. And with this detox, I know you said that the 3-day juice cleanse and 5-day juice cleanse, people do that all the time and they think that it's going to be the thing. Is it harmful to the body to do those juice cleanses?
I think that the one thing I'll always sometimes take issue with juice cleanses is like we're missing the impact. So is it going to be packed with phytonutrients and antioxidants? Absolutely. But the flip side of that is also contain a lot of sugars, right? And sugar will cause insulin levels to spike in the body, which then can increase cortisol response, which can kick off inflammatory pathways, right? So there is that double-edged sword and
Yeah.
downside to these juice cleanses, right? Like you may actually be kicking up more inflammation and more stress within the body.
Yeah, that's an excellent point because it could be helping one thing, but then it's making something else worse. And so that's why it's important to look at it from a holistic perspective of what is this detox actually going to do for my body. And
Yes.
I like how you said the first thing is reduce the the burden, the toxic load on your body. That's the first step, right? We want to make sure that our body is not having too many toxins. And then we also want to make sure our natural detox pathways is the liver the only natural detox pathway that we need to work on, or are there other pathways?
Yeah, so there's without kind of getting too weeds in the science, right? Like the liver is kind of part of where it starts because you're what the liver does is kind of will change the chemical structures of some of these toxins, allow them to be packaged up and then excreted and eliminated, if you will, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of jokingly talked about like having daily bowel movements and pooping is really important, right? Because that is one way you can kind of eliminate and get
Yes.
these out. Sweating, all right?
Yes.
So everyone's the saunas and the cold plunges, right? The saunas are a really big thing, right? So like sweating, so your skin, it's actually an organ, right? So that's one place where we can eliminate some of these toxins. So those are kind of some two other things that are really important organ systems, if you will, for enhancing elimination.
Awesome. And yeah, that was the third one, enhance that elimination part. And I know we went a little bit into this, but maybe we can go a little deeper into the mitochondria and what that impact has on the sperm and egg quality.
Yeah, so it's not just the toxins themselves that are the problem, right? Right. It's, as I alluded to earlier, it's the oxidative stress that they create inside your cells. And when I talk about kind of about oxidative stress, one of the cells that have succumbed to the oxidative stress the most is the mitochondria. Right. So these are those little tiny energy factories inside your cells that can arguably be one of the most important organelles when it comes to fertility, especially for women, because your eggs rely almost entirely on mitochondrial energy to mature properly and to be fertilized and to support embryo development. And here's a kind of interesting fact: each human egg contains about 100,000 mitochondria, which is almost far more than any other cell type. And it's those mitochondria that supply the ATP or the cell's energy currency to power processes like chromosomal alignment, fertilization, and early embryo division. So, kind of in kind of the real sciencey things that make all the magic kind of happen. So, if mitochondria in your eggs aren't functioning well, it doesn't really matter sometimes how perfect your hormone panel looks like. You're still going to run into fertility challenges, and I also see that quite frequently, where sometimes you'll get patients that had one patient kind of comes to mind, a 38-year-old who actually didn't have kind of very poor ovarian reserve. AMH didn't look very bad at all, right? Still struggling to conceive, but also a very kind of high power executive, lots of stress on a day-to-day basis, very little sleep, eating on the go, which is going to have a pretty big impact on the mitochondrial cells and their ability to create that. So it's not just kind of like, everyone's worried about the labs and the AMH, and we're not spending enough time, I think, looking at mitochondrial.
Yeah, that's true. And it gets me thinking, how do we even get this oxidative stress in the first place? I know you mentioned stress and probably chronic stress is one of them, but are there any other things that could lead to this oxidative stress in our body?
Yeah. It can come lifestyle. So we talked about one of those big ones, environmental toxins, right? But then you have other ones, so chronic physiological stress. So elevated cortisol can increase oxidative damage and suppress your body's repair systems. A poor diet, especially I think by now most of us are familiar with the standard American diet is not the healthiest diet, and we're being more mindful about reducing highly processed foods and seed oils and refined carbohydrates and sugars, right? And so most women trying to conceive are now clued into onto that. But some of the other things that we sometimes miss is like over exercising and under recovering, right? We think these processed foods are bad. Exercise is good, but over exercising and not recovering enough, intense exercise without these proper rest periods can increase oxidative byproducts and oxidative stress in the body. And then there's everyone's favorite, lack of sleep. right? So, like, again, something we're becoming more aware of with, smart devices and smart rings and watches, right? But, impaired melatonin production is one of the body's strongest mitochondrial antioxidants. So melatonin actually will go beyond enhancing sleep, right? It's a very important mitochondrial antioxidant. And then maybe like one last topic to throw out there might be the electromagnetic fields, right? So there's some early maybe research showing that links to oxidative stress and potentially impact sperm cells. But I think if you're looking at the big ones, right? We mentioned the environmental toxins and the poor diet and the chronic physiological stress and lack of sleep are some of the big ones that kind of come to mind that will end up kind of beating up the mitochondria, right? And sometimes it's like death by a thousand cuts, right?
Yeah.
It's these small daily exposures, and they add up, and they become very overwhelming for these cellular defenses, and will ultimately compromise reproductive potential as a result.
Yes, I like how you put that. The death by a thousand cuts is something that we don't really think about. They're maybe very tiny, but all of these things add up, which is can be kind of frustrating for someone who's trying to go through that checklist and they're
Yes.
thinking they've done everything. But it's also something that we might not be thinking about is the mitochondria and how that's being impacted by all these tiny little things.
Yeah, that's something I see in my clinical practice quite often. You kind of hit the nail on the head, which is like that checklist or the one thing, right? I'm looking for like the
Yeah, the
one
one
thing, or
thing.
like I've done the two or three things, but yeah, it's kind of all the small little things that will add up and stack and accumulate over time.
Yeah. Yeah. I did have a quick question with the over exercising. Are there any exercises in particular that you see can cause that more so than others?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I see people succumb victim to most often is kind of either two camps. It's the long, steady state cardio, or it's the over utilization of high intensity interval training. So it's, one of those two camps, right? So I think the similar to how the standard American diet's kind of got picked on over the years,
Yep.
long steady state cardio has kind of gotten the bad rap. Everyone's like, you like lift heavy weights and then do hit. But the high intensity interval training and small doses can actually be very stimulating and healthy for mitochondrial cells. It can stimulate kind of mitochondrial biogenesis, production of new mitochondrial cells. But too much of a good thing can become a bad thing, right? And so that's where I kind of see people get stuck and get in traps is when they kind of start doing this hit training like every day or 5 days a week. Then it becomes too much.
Yeah, doing too much where they're draining their battery and not, like you said, they're not allowing themselves to recover.
Absolutely.
What would good recovery look like?
So, sleep. All right. So you
Yeah,
kind of talked about the importance of sleep, and that can be lack of sleep as a poor trigger, right? So, sleep is huge, 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 huge. And then the chronic physiological stress, right? So, what sort of daily practices do we have to regulate that stress? And for a lot of us, it's exercise, right? For some of us, I should say it's exercise. Which then can lead like over exercising, right? So we're trying to address the stress with exercise, and then the exercise then kind of creates its own potential pitfall here. But that can open the door for non-exercise ways to manage this chronic physiological stress. So things like mindful meditation, or journaling, walks in nature, things like to that nature. So those are kind of some more of the lifestyle things. The other big bucket, if we want to go there, is going to be everyone's favorite, which is like antioxidants, right? So our body is actually equipped with our own antioxidant the defense systems, right? But sometimes we need a little extra help, and that's where people will commonly turn to supplements, right? So couple big ones there. I mean, I think everyone's kind of looking for the other same checkbox, right? But CoQ10, is the reason why CoQ10 is so important. That's always on everyone's checklist. Is it's crucial for mitochondrial ATP production, right? There is kind of the mechanism is kind of improving mitochondrial energy production. And CoQ10 levels are going to decline with age, right? Which is especially important for the egg maturation piece. We talked a little bit about earlier liver health and detoxification. Well, one of the nutrients that supports detoxification, glutathione, is actually the body's master antioxidant, which then can protect mitochondrial DNA and reduce inflammation. A precursor to glutathione, one I'll kind of commonly see on fertility blogs, is going to be NAC,
Mhm.
N-acetylcysteine. That's a precursor to glutathione. Sometimes you'll read that it helps thin cervical mucus, can reduce insulin resistance, which can be helpful with women with PCOS, and regulate inflammation. Clinically, I can't say I've seen that one be a big driver, and I don't know if there's a large stack of convincing literature. Whereas something like CoQ10, I've actually seen lots of great studies and definitely see that as moving the needle a lot. Those would be some of the top ones. Sometimes alpha lipoic acid will round out that group, or vitamin C. So those are some like kind of the top supplements to help reduce oxidative stress.
And are with these supplements, are there any of them that should not be used by certain people?
Try to think categorically on that one. That was a good one. So sometimes like vitamin E, too much vitamin E can actually then create more oxidative stress and damage. Trying to think of some of the CoQ10, like why you wouldn't take CoQ10 or glutathione, and kind of nothing kind of really comes to mind. I
Okay,
think
good.
one of the things I think about with antioxidants, and one of my mentors, Dr. William Seeds, will say is, you know, too much of an antioxidant can actually kind of create more stress on the system. So it's actually this delicate balance, right? So more again is not necessarily better. Just like more exercise isn't necessarily better. More antioxidants, there's this delicate balance that is needed, and you can put too many antioxidants in the system. So I think of less of patient populations and groups that like shouldn't take some of these, and it's just where I see more in clinical practice is people taking too much of
Yeah.
these and too many antioxidants, where I see people get more in trouble.
Yeah, that's an excellent point because I have definitely seen that as well. When someone has a lot of supplements and they have such a very high dose, they don't realize that it can have a negative effect if they have too much, because there is such thing as too much of a good thing. Can turn into a bad thing.
Yeah, it's kind of a pattern we're seeing in this kind of conversation today.
Yeah. And going a little bit more into those lifestyle habits, you said sleep, reducing stress, and clean eating. Are there any particular foods that are helpful for reducing this oxidative stress or improving our mitochondria?
Yeah, so I think we think about the Mediterranean, or Dr. Andrew Wild's adapted version of that, the anti-inflammatory diet. All right. And so it usually translates to foods that are kind of rich in different colors, right? So the colorful vegetables, that's going to be more of the clean proteins, especially things that are going to be rich in omega-3 fats, like your wild salmon and fish. Um, and we had learn about kind of an acronym called SMASH when we're thinking about healthy omega fish. So sardines and mackerel and anchovies and salmon and herring, that are going to be safe and not have environmental toxins like heavy metals and mercury, like you would see in things like tuna and other fatty fish. So, not to go back down the rabbit hole of toxins, but even being mindful again of like the foods that you're eating, omega 3s, healthy omega 3s. Actually using herbs too, which are going to be rich in a lot of different kind of antioxidants. So we we'll commonly think about those big macro groups, right? So like the proteins and the healthy fats. Herbs and spices can go a long way to decrease inflammation. I think we all kind of commonly know about turmeric, right? And curcumin. Ginger can be another powerful. Garlic can be another kind of powerful herbs. Cooking rich with those herbs can make a big difference as well when it comes to food.
So that's awesome to know because when you're cooking and you're thinking, what can I add to make this a more nutrient dense meal? Sometimes we forget about that. We forget about our spice cabinet. We forget about those little teeny ingredients that just get added maybe at the end that they can have a really big impact. Like you said, garlic, ginger, and turmeric.
Yes. Yeah. Simple things sometimes.
Simple, yeah. And let's go into the nutrients a little bit. I know that women have a lot of nutrients that we're missing. So we're depleted in a lot of nutrients, and that can contribute to just poor mitochondrial health as well as infertility. So what are some key nutrients that you see that most women are depleted in?
Yeah, so it kind of brings that up to the topic of, again, we mentioned a couple different patterns here, which is we sometimes go straight to hormones or medications, but the foundation does start with those nutrients because your body needs a lot of raw materials to produce hormones and regulate your cycle and support implantation. And if those nutrients are missing or suboptimal, like the whole system can be thrown off. Right. So, key nutrients B12 and folate. We hear those often, right? They support methylation pathways, which can be linked to the detoxification. Um, it's important for egg quality and neural tube development, neurological development, and reducing the risk of miscarriage. Right. Another important category is magnesium. Supports hormone production. Another big piece of reducing inflammation and helping regulate the hormonal axis and menstrual cycles. So that's another big category that I'll see. Zinc, it's critical for egg maturation and ovulation, and vitamin D acts like a hormone, supports ovarian function and egg quality, and immune regulation. So like, even if you're eating clean, like a lot of women that I work with, especially those struggling with fertility, we're still walking around depleted in these core nutrients. And that's not just a lab problem. It's a function problem, and you can run, you can't run an efficient hormone producing machine without these raw materials.
Yeah. Do you know why we're depleted in all of these things? Because these are very specific things.
So, we kinda teased at it earlier, right, which is gut health, and,
Oh my goodness, back to the
that's
gut health
something
and
people
toxins.
don't yeah, something people don't often realize, right? Just because 'cause you're taking a supplement doesn't necessarily mean you're absorbing that supplement.
Oh my word.
And so you spend I know a lot of patients. I mean, I can think of one patient that kind of come in with that shopping bag of supplements, and here we're pulling out the CoQ10 and the methyl factors and the omega threes, and I mean, bottles and bottles keep coming out, and you stop and look at it. It's like, how much did you spend a month on these supplements? It's like above $300, right? But did we stop to even consider, are we absorbing these? And that can come from gut inflammation, right? Which then is linked from those chronic stresses and toxins that we just talked about. Medications like antibiotics that can damage the intestinal lining, so you're not absorbing that. Low stomach acid is another one, right? So, like gut inflammation and leaky gut is something that's kind of top of everybody's mind, and they're kind of reading blogs. But low stomach acid, that's going to affect bile flow, which is important in the absorption of key nutrients like the B12 and the iron, fat soluble vitamins like the vitamin D that we talked. Another thing we'll see is microbiome imbalances, so dysbiosis. I kind of joke in my clinics. Sometimes I see an epidemic of dysbiosis. Right, a lot of women don't realize that they walk around that bloating feeling that they have is not normal. Right, just because you're a female, you should not have bloating, especially after every meal. Right, that's a clear cut sign that we have this imbalance of good and bad bacteria in our gut, which can interfere with nutrient conversion and uptake, especially those folate and B vitamins. Right,
Yeah.
so the gut is really important even when it comes to fertility.
Wow. You just answered the big question of why we even needed to start where we started in the first place. Why did we need to know about the toxins and why it's important to get rid of the toxins? Because we could be eating the right food or the best food that we could possibly think of, and we could be exercising, but if we're still putting all of these toxins in our body and we are having this stress, then our gut is not working properly, and the nutrients that we are taking through our supplements and through our food, we might not be getting them.
Exactly. I'm kind of joke in the functional medicine world. If you don't know where to start with the gut. right? Or like, you always start with the gut, right? That's where you kind of, you don't know where to go, work your way from there because it's going to have such a big impact on everything else.
Oh my goodness. And that leads us into the IV nutrient therapy. Can you share a little bit more about that? Because I'm curious how that differs from regular supplementation.
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of dovetails right into that gut health thing, right? So, and I do want to take a moment and say that IV therapy is not about just kind of being trendy, right? This is not this kind of one size fits all drip bar solution where you kind of walk in and pick something off of a
No.
menu, right? This is kind of done very strategically. It's about delivering nutrients directly into the bloodstream, right? We're trying to actually temporarily bypass the gut entirely, right? So that means no absorption issues, no interference from inflammation, no loss in the digestive process at all. So some of the key benefits can just mean higher potency or faster results, right? Because these nutrients are absorbed immediately for cellular repair and energy production and hormone production. So that means we can very quickly restore some of these intracellular nutrient levels, right? So, really important nutrients that need to kind of operate within the cell, magnesium being one of those, right? And then ultimately that's going to improve mitochondrial energy production, right? Which, as we talked about earlier, crucial for egg quality and embryo development. Those high dose antioxidants like CoQ10 and glutathione, which can now we can deliver at higher levels than you can even absorb through the gut, will help reduce that oxidative stress. Um, and then we had already kind of mentioned things like glutathione helping the liver and the gut kind of clear these hormone disrupting chemicals more efficiently.
Nice. Nice. So you could take all of those supplements and those nutrients through IV therapy?
Some of them, a lot of them
Oh,
can.
some of
Some
'em.
of them, not everything mixes well in IV fluids, right? So, for instance, our CoQ10 is an oil base, so that one's typically done via subcutaneous or intramuscular injection, but at a much higher dose than you can absorb kind of orally. Vitamin D, another one we will typically do via injection, but by and large, the rest of them can be done at much higher doses through an infusion. So vitamin C and magnesium and B complexes and even methylfolate, methyl B12, all of these other really important ones. And some people will, I think a common criticism or feedback, like negative feedback you get is like, won't you just kind of pee all these out, or isn't just kind of creating expensive urine? You hear that a lot with oral supplementation, but we just kind of went back to the fact that you may not actually be able to get these absorbed in the bodies at levels that you need to have an impact at a cellular level.
Hmm. And so with the nutrient therapy, the IV therapy, you actually can absorb more so they are less likely to go out in your urine?
Yeah, I mean, so it's giving us a fast track to
Good.
replenish what the body desperately needs
Yeah.
to support hormone balance and fertility.
Yeah, and with that, just to double check for some people who are curious about this, you wouldn't be taking oral supplementation at the same time as the IV or the injections. Is that correct?
Sometimes it depends,
Okay,
right?
it depends.
It's not like a clear cut answer for everyone. One thing I didn't mention that we'll do a lot in my clinical practice is we'll do micronutrient lab testing, right? And a lot of my patients will come in and say, should I stop taking all my supplements before I do this testing? And actually, my answer is typically no. I actually want to see what you're absorbing while you're taking these because it can start to reveal patterns of do you potentially have an MTFR gene mutation if I'm seeing things like B12 and folate, um, or do you have leaky gut because not seeing iron absorbed and different B vitamins absorbed? So I'm kind of looking for patterns, and sometimes, I want women to continue some of the oral supplementation, and that can be from patterns that we're seeing in different micronutrient deficiencies. Sometimes it can come down to like how often can you actually come in for these infusions, right? So like not everyone can come in weekly for this, right? So if we're doing this more on a monthly basis to try to enhance what they're getting through their oral supplements. So it's kind of going to depend on a lot of different factors, right? Timing factors and what's happening at every individual patient.
Yeah, and it sounds like do you have to monitor them frequently, like monitor them on a weekly or a monthly basis to make sure they're not taking too many nutrients?
One of the biggest ones you can kind of get into trouble with that I'll see kind of commonly will be one of the fat soluble vitamins, vitamin D. right? So these will accumulate, right? These fat soluble vitamins can accumulate and stack. And by and large, for the most part, you you won't get into too much trouble with some of these micronutrients, but things like vitamin D, as it stacks up, you can increase your risk for kidney stones and some other detrimental health consequences. And so, if you're working hard to try to conceive, the last thing you want to do is then kind of be dealing with kidney stones, right? So, I think more concern around the fat soluble vitamins is kind of the take home than I am for some of the water soluble vitamins.
And for someone who's interested in this type of therapy, where would you recommend that they go to get this done? Because like you said that there are pop-ups all over the place saying IV drip bars and do this over here and it seems so easy, but is there something that they should be looking for?
Almost always, always, always in the office of an integrative functional medicine specialist, all right? Somebody who is going to take a true personalized kind of root cause approach to health, right? Where you're not walking and picking something off of a menu, or somebody without a medical degree is giving you advice on what you should be putting in your body, right? And it may be the fact that the IV nutrient therapy is not the best tool for somebody, right? And sitting down and having that conversation and maybe doing a deeper evaluation on blood work, we need to be focusing on other tools. I think IV therapy is a fantastic tool to address a lot of what we discussed, right? Gut health and kind of leaky gut and dysbiosis. It's going to help in optimize mitochondrial health and improve detoxification pathways. But that may not always be what everyone needs, and IV therapy may not be the tool. So I think integrative functional medicine, practices that incorporate IV therapy as a bigger treatment plan and strategy is where I'd recommend individuals kind of looking if they're intrigued and want to go down this road.
Yeah, and you just nailed it on the head with a bigger treatment plan strategy. So this is not like a supplement you can just buy at the grocery store or buy online and just go to a drip bar. This is something that you need guidance and support and monitoring as you're doing it.
Absolutely. It's not the single silver bullet, the one thing. It is one of many things that can be very helpful when I'm working with women to try to optimize fertility.
And you've said a couple of times where that this is something that you help with women to optimize their fertility. Is this something that you've ever done with men as well?
Yeah, we kind of stumbled upon a couple. I alluded to a few things here where you're getting impacts on sperm quality and sperm production. Right. A lot of the literature sits in the space of looking at helping women optimize their fertility, but the more and more we're seeing what impact it has on sperm quality and sperm production. A lot of those same things carry over. Things like CoQ10, very important for sperm quality and sperm production. Right. And so it's I think developing that awareness that there is the male factor component, and then getting the men to also come in. I've had some great couples come in along the way. Kind of one couple kind of comes to mind where have been going through several rounds of IVF and still kind of struggling despite the woman doing everything right and us doing kind of a pretty big workup. And finally, kind of got the husband in, got the evaluation, and there was a clear male factor with kind of sperm motility and quality. And once we kind of started layering in some things like higher doses of CoQ10 and glutathione, we're actually start to see some improvements in those numbers. So yes, the male factor also very important. A lot of these things kind of carry over, right? Gut health is not just an issue women struggle with, and toxin overload is also not a thing women struggle with. It's the thing that we all struggle with.
Yeah. Awesome. Wonderful. And as we are coming to a close and we're wrapping this up on the understanding toxins in our body and why we need to boost our mitochondria, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
I think the you know fertility isn't just about kind of making a baby, right? It's about becoming the healthiest version of yourself, right? And so, that your body wants to bring life in this world, right? And so before we just reach for hormones, we need to kind of let's ask our body, is our body even ready to conceive, right? Do we have healthy guts? Right. Have we reduced the environmental toxins in and around us? Are we managing our stress? So it's, have we created this optimal environment to kind of go through this journey?
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge about this. This is something that a lot of people don't really talk about. So I appreciate you sharing this information with us today.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure.
And thank you so much, listeners. I really appreciate you taking time to listen to this episode. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the comment section. And if you have any thoughts for other episodes, also put that in the comment section. And I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Empowered Fertility Podcast. If you're looking for personalized support on your journey, whether that's through therapy or coaching, please reach out. Just complete the contact form linked in the show notes, and someone from my team will be in touch with next steps. Remember, you are not alone. You are not broken, and your story is not over. See you in the next episode.